Howdy, how are y'all doing today? My name's Samuel David Duck. It's good to see y'all again. Today I'm going to be covering a lecture on repealing the 16th and the 17th Amendment. Primarily I'm going to focus on just exposing the defects of these amendments and their effects on our legislation and on our cash flow in this country. But first I want to begin by reading you something a gentleman by the name of Melanchthon Smith wrote in 1789. Actually 1787, while Alexander Hamilton was trying to get the Constitution ratified in the state of New York. The nation of Israel, having received a form of civil government from heaven, enjoyed it for a considerable period, but at length laboring under pressures which were brought upon them by their own misconduct and imprudence, instead of imputing their fortunes to their true causes and making a proper improvement of their calamities, by a correction of their errors, they imputed them to a defect in their constitution. They rejected their divine ruler and asked Samuel to make them a king to judge them, like other nations. Samuel was grieved at their folly, but still by the command of God he hearkened to their voice, though not until he had solemnly declared unto them the manner in which the king should reign over them. This, says Samuel, shall be the manner of the king that shall reign over you. He will take your sons and appoint them for himself, for his chariots and for his horsemen, and some shall run before his chariots, and he will appoint them captains over thousands and captains over fifties, and will set them to ear his ground, and reap his harvest, and make his instruments of war, and instruments of his chariots. And he will take your daughters to be confectionaries, and to be cooks, and to be bakers. And he will take your fields, and your vineyards, and your olive yards, and even the best of them, and give them to his servants. And he will take the tenth of your seed and of your vineyards, and give them to his officers, to his servants. And he will take your men servants and maid servants, and your godliest young men, and your asses, and put them to his work. He will take the tenth of your sheep, and ye shall be his servants, and ye shall cry out that day because of your king, which ye have chosen you, and the Lord will not hear you in that day. Now, yeah, hindsight's 2020. We can understand that Melanchthon Smith pretty well described what's going on in 2010 all the way back from 1787. But even then, can you imagine being Alexander Hamilton? You're running around the nation. You've come back to your home state of New York. You're trying to get each of these states to ratify the Constitution so that we can form a United States. And so when you come back home trying to get your home state to ratify this, then this is the kind of arguments you get against you. Our founding fathers were something else. They looked at everything from every angle. And yeah, I don't mean to belittle the prophets of the Bible, but my goodness, it seems to me, at least for that moment, Melanchthon Smith was a prophet, because he predicted what would be going on 230-odd years later. So I'm just standing in awe. But where this becomes important is proper problem identification. If you're going to solve any problem, it's absolutely crucial that you actually truly identify the causes. We are responsible for all of our domestic problems. Now, I'm not talking about international problems, but domestic problems. We're responsible for them. Our legislators complain about the deficit, but they're the ones that set the budget, for example. So we are responsible for this. We think the Constitution was the problem. We amended it and made problems worse, and I'm referring to the 16th and 17th Amendment. A lot of people are proposing amending the Constitution further, but again, the Constitution is not the problem. We need to make a proper identification, and the problem is ourselves. More amendments will not help. More points that Melanchthon Smith made. Kings enlist our sons in the military to fight wars which do not involve us. That sounds familiar. Kings have scandals with our daughters. Kings tax and take what is not theirs. Yeah. Does that sound like the politicians that you know? So let's start talking about the 16th Amendment a little bit. I used to think that the 16th Amendment, anybody that was complaining about it was essentially complaining about taxes. That was my own personal view, and I think a lot of people also hold that same view. But the fact of the matter is the 16th Amendment actually has as much to do with sovereignty as anything else. And so we're going to begin there and see what the 16th Amendment actually says. The Congress shall have the power to lay and collect taxes on incomes from whatever source derived without apportionment among the several states and without any regard to census or enumeration. This is the clause of the Constitution which legalized the income tax. This led to the creation of the IRS, and it was ratified in February 13th, 1913. So I want you to pencil down that year, 1913. There are a lot of things that happened in 1913. So this is the misconception of the 16th Amendment, as I just said. A lot of people think it involves taxes. It actually pertains to state sovereignty. A lot of politicians talk about sovereignty. They talk about the 10th Amendment, but their words are merely rhetoric which tickles itching ears. In order to achieve state sovereignty, words will not be enough. We need an actionable plan. In order to create a plan, we need to identify and study the problem. I hope to talk about this a little bit more, but I continue to study this problem in the 16th Amendment. It's amazing how many things that I keep finding day after day is actually wrong with this amendment, and I'm not going to get to all of them here. However, let's take the next step and look at how sovereignty is actually eroded. Article 1, Section 9 tells us that no preference shall be given by regulation or commerce or revenue to the ports of one state over those of another. Essentially what this means is the federal government has to spread its protections, its money evenly across the states. And what I argue is if a state refuses to just simply cede control to the federal government in exchange for money, and then the federal government takes that same money and gives it to another state, then essentially the federal government is showing favoritism to those states which just simply step in line with the federal government, and that is unconstitutional, and that's an erosion of the 10th Amendment by proxy of what's really a soft bribe. States are generally unwilling to challenge this because it would involve first losing the money, then challenging it in court, and then there's a possibility that the state may lose and never get the money back. So yeah, and furthermore, the federal government often refers to a soft bribe for offers a soft bribe for cooperation. After that, states rarely cite sovereignty because they want the money. Budgets are tight in all of the states. Tennessee actually is one of the better states in the union. In fact, I think we're the least indebted state out of all 50. I'm glad to be number one in something. And at least that's a very measurable, tangible thing to be number one in. But if you think it's bad here, just look at places like California and Illinois, Rhode Island, Hawaii. They have horrible problems with money. So we're actually in pretty good shape, at least by comparison. I'd rather just be in good shape, period, not have to stick by comparison on the end of it. So why does this work to erode sovereignty? The 16th Amendment changed cash flow in the United States, and that's really the important thing. Initially, cash flowed from the people to the state to the federal government. The states paid the federal government for services rendered. In a post-16th Amendment United States, cash flows from the people to the federal government and then back to the states for compliance with federal mandate. And a lot of times people are looking to save money. You just think of this. By the time, like say in the education system, by the time the IRS taxes you, then that goes to the federal government, to the Department of Education, and it comes back down to the state, and the state turns around and pays the community. How many hands does that money pass through? Do you think each of these hands are taking their cut? So the cash flow at minimum would be much more efficient for local governments if it went straight to the local government to begin with and didn't go through all of these hands. So that's an important point.